In this video, I am going to make the case for why landlords that allow for cats make more money and also succeed in bigger picture thinking. But first, I am going to tell you about my own very traumatic $7,500 cat nightmare story, and I am doing this to give you some context for how much my thinking has changed on this particular topic. We have had rental properties since 2014. We have had furnished rentals since 2017, and I have written 3 books about furnished monthly rentals, also sometimes called the traveling nurse model or the midterm rental model, which is what I call this space. So again, furnished monthly rentals. And I have written 3 books on this model, this rental model, since 2020 because COVID really popularized this model, and because this midterm rental model requires less work than a short-term rental but makes more money than a long-term unfurnished model. It's just grown and grown and grown in awareness and appeal for different landlords. I have spent a lot of time thinking about how to be successful with monthly rentals. My own properties for the people that watch these videos, and then for the people that I assist in getting renters for their properties. It's obvious to me that my perspective on some topics has really shifted. In particular, on cats, my perspective has shifted from being fear-based and bias-based to money-based. And because I've had my own bad experience with cats, I think it contextualizes why I made that leap and how I may have lived through your worst nightmare with cats and yet still am at the point where I recommend allowing for cats if you're a landlord. That said, there is a caveat for this. There is a very specific time and situation when you would allow for cats as a landlord, and I will cover that in this video. In the next section, I'll break down what happened in our rental property. And if you learn anything during this video, please like this video. And if you are a new landlord looking for resources on how to landlord, this channel is for you. I guess I can start the story by saying that there were red flags. There were actually quite a few red flags, but none of those red flags were cats. We were entering our 8th year, and we really hadn't had problematic tenants before these renters showed up. And the reason why I'm saying that is because in real estate investing and rental property and landlording content, there is a lot of fear, and that just hasn't been my experience. Think of renters not as tenants, but think of them as people that pay your mortgage, and also think of them as clients and treat them accordingly. That mind shift alone will help you have more successful rentals, because you'll start approaching your rentals as having clients that need to be serviced instead of adversaries that you need to be afraid of. So these renters came from Facebook, and they were moving to Colorado from Texas. There were 2 different couples, and between the 2 different couples, there were 4 adults and 4 children. This morning in prep for this video, I looked back at the emails between James and myself, and I can see that immediately there was confusion between the 2 of us, between James and I, as to whether or not there would be 2 kids or 4 kids showing up. And while this was resolved before we signed a lease with them, this was the first red flag that we should have been concerned about. And the reason for that is that there should really never be any confusion about who is showing up. And when there is confusion, or when there are vague details, it should be concerning to you as the landlord, because when renters are vague, sometimes that suggests that they are hiding something. A second red flag with these renters is something that I talk about with my consulting clients all the time. And it has to do with short-term rentals. Because in short-term rentals, you're gonna have a heads in bed strategy, meaning you're gonna maximize the number of people that can sleep in the property, because you will make the most money as a landlord in that situation. But in the midterm rental strategy, it's different. So the rental property we were renting had 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and rental had a nice split between an upstairs and a basement. And what I mean by that is that there were 2 large bedrooms, a bathroom with a shower, and a living room in the basement, so one family could live down there. And then upstairs there was also 2 large bedrooms, a bathroom with a shower, and a living room. So it was really good for 2-family living, and then they would share the kitchen and the laundry, which worked for them because they were a group of friends. So the reason why having a lot of people on a property in a short-term rental works is because they're not using the appliances as much, they're not staying very long. If they're in town, they might be out doing things. But to have 8 people in a 4-bedroom house for a midterm rental, meaning a month or more, and in this case a full year, That's really a problem because of the amount of wear and tear, not only on the furniture, but on the appliances. The property gets used really hard. So that was red flag number 2. And while there are ways to protect against both of these red flags, and never being in the situation, period, is preferable, it only matters so much. And I'll explain why it only matters so much in a minute here. And then finally, their third red flag was their credit score. So it wasn't great. And in fact, it was so not great that we initially told them that we didn't want to take them after we saw the credit score. But then to help offset this, they offered to pay us upfront rent, they increased the deposit, et cetera, et cetera. So we added some items to our lease to help mitigate our risk in this situation. And it's worth noting those items did protect us ultimately at the end. And if you want a copy of the lease, you can download it for free. I will link to it in the top comment of this video. So we ended up taking them despite these 3 major red flags, which obviously I have learned from. So when we took back the property a year later, it was pretty obvious that the renters had snuck in cats. And we knew that they had cats because there was different types of cat hair in the curtains, on the upholstery, and then also we knew that they had cats because the basement smelled tremendously horrible. I mean, so awful that it was hard to even be in the basement. And yes, it is hard for me to imagine how they live down there. And we had new renters coming in 4 days. So I was obviously a little bit panicked. Ultimately, we spent $7,500 over those 4 days to repair the damages that these renters and these cats had done. And the cats were responsible for about $6,000 of that $7,500 in damages. And that's because we had to replace upholstery, furniture. We had to replace some of the laminate vinyl flooring that they had damaged, etc. And you may be wondering at this point how I could possibly have moved from having that experience, and believe me, I was very upset and very traumatized, to now stating that money-minded landlords and landlords that want to make the most money are going to take cats. And that is a fair question. Well, to begin with, the raw numbers still worked very much in our favor, regardless of the money that we had to spend to get the property right again. And what I mean by that is that we were paid $3,200 per month for 12 months by these tenants. So they paid us $38,400. And I am an investor that is much more interested in long-term appreciation than I am in cash flow. So I see that contribution as $38,400 toward our mortgage. But also in a cash flow sense, we netted approximately $8,000 after our expenses. And our expenses are the PMI plus the utilities. We also acquired a $4,200 deposit from them, so higher than the monthly rent. And that's because they had questionable credit, so we did take a higher deposit. So we had a $4,200 deposit on top of the annual amount that they had paid us. So really, we had $42,600 from them over a year's worth of time. And when you do the math, that's $12,200 in net earnings. Now the damage they did cost us $7,500, and that takes down our net earnings to $4,700. But again, we still came out ahead in sheer cash flow, and the overall money that they paid us beyond what we had to pay to make the property right again was $35,100. So $35,100 towards our mortgage after we had replaced the furniture, etc. And trust me, I know it is not just about the money. It is about stress of seeing something that you love treated poorly, seeing the damage to your property, questioning how people can act like this. I get all of that because I felt that way. But it's not just money. It's also about the stress that it will bring to your life and how problematic that can be. Nevertheless, your rental property is a business. It may be your first small business if you're new to this. And when we're talking about small businesses, it's about the money. And rentals are not a 1-year investment or a 2-year investment. Rentals, like small businesses, should be approached as something that has a long-term forecasting, let's say 5 years, 10 years. And when you look at it that way, you don't expect to have success or an equal amount of success or a graduating amount of success every year for 5 years or 10 years. You might have a year where something is outside of your control and your business loses a little bit of money. If you know that you can recover next year, it helps put everything into perspective, and that makes damages or items that are out of your control that go wrong less scary and more palpable. Not that you want it at that point, but it's less devastating to the long-term picture. So we had this one bad year. And I think it's important that we recognize the circumstances because it was kind of a perfect storm for a $7,500 disaster. And that's because they snuck in the 2 cats. So we explicitly said no cats, they snuck them in. These renters stayed for a full year, and that's not common for a midterm rental. Most midterm rentals will stay for like 2 months or 4 months. Now, we see extensions, but if you were going to do an extension, you would likely check on the property before you did that extension. So in most cases, you're not going to have a year-long rental where you don't have eyes on the property. And then the final piece of this is that they neglected their pets. And so for all of those things to come together is pretty bad luck, because in most cases, you're going to have a shorter rental period. Someone is not going to sneak in cats. And if they have a cat, with your blessing, will be thoughtful about how they treat that cat and your property. And also, and this really saved us, you can always take a deposit to protect yourself, and you can always move the deposit up and down depending on the circumstances of the renter. And you may be thinking, well, great, but wouldn't you still prefer your place didn't get damaged? Wouldn't you still prefer a renter that doesn't have a cat? Why would anyone ever risk renting 2 cats if you could have an experience like that, like the one I just described? Well, for a couple of years, I shared this belief. I was an absolute hard no on cats, while at the same time advocating that landlords allowed for dogs. And I was advocating that rental properties allowed for dogs, or that landlords allowed for dogs, for a couple of reasons. The first being that insurance shows that landlords that allow for pets come out ahead financially, meaning the amount of damage that pets cost to a property is less than the amount of money that landlords can get by renting to people with pets. Second, in Colorado, where all of my properties were located at the time, where a lot of renters have and or want to have dogs. So I knew that it would open up my rental pool dramatically. And third, I haven't had a negative experience renting to dogs. So I really pushed for that for a long time, and I still really push that if you are a landlord, you should allow for dogs, because it's just going to open up the rental pool massively. But that's for dogs. So why cats? And why should some people allow for cats, but other people shouldn't allow for cats? Again, if you look at what happened to James and I's rental property, the owner snuck in the cats. So we never signed off on cats. Our policy was no cats, but we still got 2 cats. There are ways that I protect myself from renters that are going to neglect their animals and neglect my property, but the language I use isn't just no cats. I now have a process for how I vet renters to prevent renters with problem behaviors. And this vetting mechanism holds whether that's for cats or some other lesser desirable quality. But what I don't do is make sweeping no rules across the board about everything. I instead have standards for every renter that comes in, and I actually require them to communicate with me in a way that locks them into the rules as well. More important than the stress of a bad rental or a bad year or cats is vacancy. Vacancy is your number one threat as a landlord. And because most landlords won't take cats, but 29% of the rental market has cats, that means that 29% of the rental market is underserved. And a very fast way to close up your vacancy is to allow for cats and to advertise that you allow for cats. It's not enough to just allow for cats. Your listing needs to scream it. You need to get their attention because they're used to approaching the situation in a mindset of no one's going to allow these cats. So really be out in front of the people that have cats and let them know this rental allows for cats. And so I had this situation recently where I have a rental up and it has a couch in there that I love. And that's because it's my primary residence and I flipped it. And someone came in and they had a cat and they were interested in the property. And I was really struggling with this because of this couch. And I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to that couch. And this was a custom couch. Most rentals are going to have like a $700 couch because it's not going to be a primary residence getting flipped. In my case, it was a primary residence getting flipped, but most rentals are going to have a far cheaper couch. So let's say your rental has a $700 couch, which has no sentimental value to you. Well, is your mortgage less than $700? If it's not, you should take that cat and you should take a deposit, because every decision is going to be made against how much am I going to lose monetarily in vacancy versus the risk of having a cat. And there's 2 things here. Am I more likely to lose money on someone not renting and the place sitting and me having to pay the mortgage? Or am I more likely to get a renter that disclosed they had a cat, brought in the cat and then the cat destroyed something and the renter didn't tell me and my deposit won't cover it. And when you look at the risk that way, it really helps clear up the whole cat problem in my mind. It's not that I don't have risk on both sides, but I think the risk of losing more money is bigger with vacancy than it is with cats. Okay, so at this point you may or may not be bought in. I would say for my consulting clients, it's usually 70-30. 70 will adopt this, 30 will still be pushing back. And if you're part of that 30% that's just like, I really reject the idea of having cats. Like, you've just told me this nightmare story about having cats. I do not want a cat in my property. I get it. So this is when you would allow for a cat, and this is when you would not allow for a cat. If you have a property and you put it up and it's an absolute winning property, it has so much interest at the price that you want, it rents all day, you've never had a problem renting it, or it's brand new, you put it up, it rents immediately, then you don't have a problem. You don't need to allow for cats. You don't need to make concessions because you have a property that everyone wants at the rate that you want and you're having no problem renting it. But if you put up a rental and it doesn't get a lot of interest, not only might you be priced too high, but you also want to look for competitive advantages in the market. And opening up your rental to a neglected 29%, almost 30% of the market, almost 1 in 3 renters, that will help shrink your vacancy quickly. And so you may not have that type of property that just everyone wants. And if you don't have a property that just everyone wants, then you need to start to be creative and think about your competitive and market advantages and lean into those. And a cat is one strong way to do that. All right, now that you know how to contextualize whether or not you should allow for cats in your rental properties, you are probably wondering about how to prevent problematic renters. There's good news. I have made a video for that, and you can find it here.